Robert Morris is not sitting in prison. He was not sentenced to prison. While he did receive a 10-year sentence, he is actually in jail. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to clear up some misinformation that I've seen out there. There is a difference between jail and prison. So we're going to get into that in a minute. I'm going to be talking about Robert Morris, as you guys know. That's on the thumbnail. Mike Bickle, Michelle Brannon, and Sean Combs, because there's news about them this week. And I've been covering Michelle Brannon, but there's something more that came out just I want to touch on. There was a new article that came out. So let's talk about this. Jail and prison. I see this a lot happening. People conflate those two terms. They are two very different places. Jail is a temporary holding cell. Think of it like that. It's a temporary facility. It's run by the county. It's run by the sheriff in that county. And typically people that are arrested, they're going to go to jail, right? They're going to bond out. They're going to go to court at some point. If they can't bond out and they're waiting for their trial, then they're going to sit in jail until the trial. Now, if somebody's been charged with a misdemeanor, that is a lesser charge. There's misdemeanors, there's felonies. Misdemeanor is up to a year, punishable by up to a year in jail. And a felony is anything above that. So if somebody had a felony and they were given a sentence of a year and a day, so it would take them out of that jail. It would bring them into Department of Corrections, which is a state-run facility. It's run by the state. If it's federal, it's run by the Bureau of Prisons. So I say all that because I've seen people saying that, and headlines even, saying that Robert Morris got 6 months in prison. Here's a key. If you see somebody saying that, oh, they just got 6 months in prison, no, the sentence would have to be more than a year if they were going to prison. So that's another way to differentiate between prison and jail. So if you've been watching my channel, you know I've been talking about Tom Cassie. He's in jail. He's sitting in jail in Licking County, but the trial will be Knox County. He's been in there since April 18th because he can't make the $2 million bond. Sheriffs run that jail. So he's there until his trial on November 18th, which I anticipate is going to happen. Now, I know people have been contacting me and sending me the articles. I am very much aware that there is a civil lawsuit that was recently filed against Tom Cassie and Faith Life Church, to include Drenda and Gary. I am aware of this. I've said this before. There's things that I know, and I know a lot of stuff more than what I share on the channel. There's things that I can and cannot talk about. So I will move on from there. So a lot has happened this week. At the end of the week, end of the month, I should say, so September 29th or 30th, there was that new report in regard to Mike Bickle. Then on October 1st, Michelle Brannon got the $10,000 bond. Then on Thursday, October 2nd, Robert Morris was sentenced. And then Sean Combs was sentenced yesterday on October 3rd. So let's get into this. If you're new here on my channel, I provide commentary, my opinions on cases. I cover things that are in the news in regard to churches, mega churches, pastors, leaders in the Christian community, about abuse, about cover-up, particularly cover-up. There is a cover-up culture in which church leaders are engaging in, and the people that are surrounding them and helping them and working with them, they're doing it. I've shared this on other videos, and I've shared that I believe, and this is my opinion, that perhaps while the perpetrator is bad as it is, that leader who's done the crime, done the act, whatever it is, but I think even worse are those that are covering it up. Those are friends, those are relatives, those are people that are getting paid by the ministry that they're working in, whatever it is. Those are the people that are just as bad, if not worse, because they're covering it up and staying silent in the midst of all of this corruption and immorality. All that serves to do is give license to these people that have been doing the corruption and covering it up. And it's not holding anybody to account. It's not helping anybody. We have to keep talking about these things. Mike Winger has been talking about it. I really appreciate him and his channel. He has such a large platform, almost 1 million subscribers. So I understand that he's getting attacked, and we have to keep praying for all of us. Not only the podcasters, people that are also in the community that are watching and commenting. You guys are our supporters, and you cannot deny that this is happening, that people are getting attacked for telling the truth. I mean, that's on my banner. If you want to speak the truth, you're going, what does it say? I can't remember. If you speak the truth, that you're going to get attacked, something like that. I can't even remember my banner at this time. My mind is fried. For 2 days, I have been trying to put this video together, kind of on and off, and just doing other things in between. So that should really say something to us in this season, where, you know, people that are coming forward and speaking, whether you are a victim and you're speaking about it, or you're a whistleblower, or you're somebody that's speaking for a victim and you're getting attacked, well, that's a red flag in and of itself. You should be able to come forward. We have the right to free speech here, and we should be able to do that. And a lot of these topics that we're talking about, they're just not hitting mainstream media. They're not. I mean, even the David E. Taylor cult, that's not mainstream media as far as national. They're local mainstream media, but not national. And somebody, if you have seen it national, please send that link. Just add it in the comments. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first start off with Robert Morris, because I have been watching that. I've been waiting for that. And there's a lot that I want to share about Robert Morris. And in doing so, we have to go back and just recap, because I think it's very important, because I think it shares the story of how we got to where we are and what Cindy has had to go through. If you guys don't know, I'm just going to recap this. In 1982, Robert Morris was a traveling pastor. He was 21 at the time. He was married, and I believe he even had a child. And so he was living in Texas, but he would travel to Oklahoma, and he stayed at Cindy Clemenshire's family's house in Oklahoma. And she was 12, and the first SA was on Christmas of that year, 1982. And decades later, after this went on for quite some time. I'm going to get into it, but she hired an attorney to sue Robert Morris. And at that time, Robert Morris's attorney was Shelby Sharp, and he knew that Cindy was 12, and he knew of the allegations. And at that time, Cindy's lawyer was Gettner Drummond. That might sound familiar to you, because he is now the Attorney General in Oklahoma. Yes, the same exact office that indicted him, that charged Robert Morris with those 5 felonies against Cindy. So Cindy's lawyer told Robert's lawyer about Cindy being 12, and he shot back and said that Cindy, 12-year-old Cindy, was the one who initiated the inappropriate conduct with Robert Morris by coming into his bedroom, which, by the way, was Cindy's bedroom. Robert was staying in it. But Cindy says that he called her into the bedroom before bed. And she says that he told her to get into the bed. Now, this allegation by his attorney is nothing new. There's nothing new under the sun, is there? This is what we see bad people do, perpetrators do, people that want to cover stuff up. They're going to blame the victim and say it was the victim who was the perpetrator, who was the villain, who was the bad guy. Very similar to an RAP victim, where they ask, well, what were you wearing? Oh, you shouldn't have been wearing that short skirt. What did you think he was going to do? What kind of makeup did you have on? Did you have that red lipstick on? That's seductress. That's a seductress color on you. Those are the kinds of things that we've been hearing for decades. I mean, it hasn't stopped. There's laws against it. I used to be an SA prosecutor. You cannot bring into evidence what that person was wearing. It's not relevant. And you can't bring into evidence their past sexual conduct either. It's not relevant. The crime occurred. And it's really sad that we even have to talk about it in this day and age. It's 2025 and we're still talking about it. When I prosecuted, it was 20 years ago. These evil remarks, and even to a domestic violence survivor. Well, what did you say to cause him or her to hit you? As if it's the victim who's the one that's causing the bad guy to act in the manner that he or she is acting in. It's horrendous. And you guys, we have to keep talking about this, because if we don't, it's not going to come out to the forefront. People are not going to be aware. People need to be made aware of this stuff. What they do is they blame the victim, they gaslight, and the world has become so proficient at doing this. But meanwhile, you would think that in the church, this can't possibly happen. Well, behold, it's very alive and well and prospering in the church. It's commonplace. And it's learned, and they keep doing it, and they're not stopping, because here we are. If this wasn't going on, we wouldn't be here. What I've seen in this space, having my YouTube channel for just a mere 8 months, is just, it's really eye-opening. It's demonic. It's absolutely evil. And so if you are new, because of the content that I'm going to be discussing today, because all of my viewers know this, if you are new and you're joining, welcome, but I do have to caution, I do not allow people to leave remarks that are disparaging or blaming the victim. So yes, I said what I said to lead up to this. So if you do leave such a comment, it will be removed. This is a safe place for whistleblowers, for survivors, and for conversations about that, so that we get educated. That's what this is about. Talking about this, revealing the stuff that's going on in back rooms. It's not going to be, we're shedding a light on this. And it needs to happen. So I'm going to sum up here. So recall back we're talking about Robert Morris. I'm trying to sum up. Recall that she was just trying to get $50,000 from him, but he refused, and he wanted her to sign an NDA, and if she would take 25. And thank goodness she did not do that. And remember last year she came out and her story was in the Wartburg Watch, and she talked about what happened and how Morris responded in a statement admitting to inappropriate sexual behavior, stating that he had long ago confessed and repented, and that he had a moral failure 35 years ago, but the church didn't realize, apparently, but we learned that they did, that she was 12. She was a kid. She wasn't a young lady, as they referred to. And then within days after this came out, then he resigned as the senior pastor there. And since then, Cindy has come out multiple interviews, and in fact, she worked on getting legislature passed in Texas for a law so that children would be protected, and that NDAs would not be allowed when it comes to, that they wouldn't be valid if it relates to a case where there's a child SA survivor. So there's no doubt that Cindy is a forerunner. She is the prototype of what I see of a survivor right now in this space that we have. And she is truly a reflection of courage and hope and just strength. She is definitely a picture of strength. I do not know Cindy, but I admire her. I suspect that she has a team of family members and friends that are godly, that are loving, that God handpicked and appointed to surround her for such a time as this. And I believe that because of Cindy coming out, staying this long, arduous journey for 4 decades, that many people will be touched, will be helped, will be healed. They will come out because this has to be exposed, and the only way it can be exposed is by people coming out. So yes, Cindy, you are just absolutely amazing. Cindy states, and I'm taking these excerpts from some of these articles that have come out. She stated in an article that she struggled for years with profound confusion for what Morris did, believing for nearly 2 decades that she was the one to blame. She said that he molested her more than 100 times over 4.5 years, with the first encounter being Christmas in 1982. Started out with a lot of kissing and touching and inserting fingers into her body, she said. She said that Morris pressured her to have intercourse, but she refused. And Morris has even acknowledged the kissing and the petting and argued that a number of the incidents was a fraction of what Clemishire alleges. Clemishire said that in the mid-2000s, after years of counseling, after having watched a television interview about grooming and SA, she realized then what had happened to her. And this is quite common, especially if you're dealing with children or young adults. They might not realize what happened to them, and then they watch a movie, hear a story, talking to a friend, and that's when they realize what happened to them, and it clicks. And this is what happened with Deborah Perkins in regard to the Mike Bickle exposure. She was watching an interview of a victim of Bill Cosby, and then it clicked with her. So Cindy's lawyer, Gettner Drummond, he relayed to Robert Morris's lawyer that Robert Morris had convinced her, Cindy, that she was responsible for what he did to her, and that she was in fact the offender. And Drummond then attached a draft of a lawsuit that he planned on filing. And then Sharp responded a week later with a letter accusing Cindy as the one who initiated it, and even said that there were 2 other men that stayed in her home between those same years. Now that's interesting, because that's what we see happen. Though it's the Saudi defense. Some other dude did it. So we saw that also if you've watched the Tom Cassie footage. As soon as he gets picked up, he's brought into the sheriff's office, right? And he's saying, I want to talk to you guys, but he's saying that he wants his lawyer there. And he says, I want to talk to you because I can clear this up, because my sister, who she's one of the victims, her husband did these things to her. It's pointing to somebody else, which is so irrational and so strange and illogical, because they're pointing to you. She didn't make an identity mistake. She knows who her brother is. It's not some other dude. It's you. But you see it time and time again. And that's essentially what this Shelby Sharp was doing. Same time period, saying it was other people. It's really disgusting. So, in an interview, Cindy disputed those characterizations, and she said that, yes, 2 other men had touched her inappropriately at her home when she was a child. And in fact, one of them tried to R-word her. In fact, she said that the man suddenly got off her. And in an interview, she said, I really think that God intervened. God made him feel like someone was walking by, and he just rolled off me and left, thank God. And it was an incident, she said, that eventually led her to confide in Faulkner Woodcliff, a family friend. And ultimately, that's when she disclosed what happened to her by Robert Morris. And this person, Faulkner Woodcliff, hard to say the name for me, insisted that she tell her parents. And that's when it happened in March of 1987. Her father learned that Robert Morris was SAing his daughter, Cindy. And then she said that her father was enraged and contacted Olin Griffin, the senior pastor at Shady Grove Church, to demand that Morris step out of ministry. And Cindy remembered getting a call a few days later from none other than Robert Morris's wife, Debbie, saying, I forgive you. So Cindy would have been 17 at that time. What a narcissistic, manipulative, evil woman she is, referring to Debbie, not Cindy. Cindy said in an interview, I'll never forget that. They wanted me to believe that me, the child, was responsible for what happened, and they never stopped trying to make me believe that. I think that that statement is so impactful, and it really could be the cry of many people right now, speaking of the ones who abuse them, that they tried and tried and tried for so long, so hard to make the victim believe that it was them. And that's what we need an awakening about. The victim is the victim. The perpetrator is not the victim. Let's get it right. And then in years since then, Morris repeatedly told a sanitized story, and then even from the pulpit talked about sexual immorality, saying that he had sinful pride, and just talked about, on June 10th, 2017, a sermon entitled The Principle of Honesty, where he described going through a restoration process about 7 years into his marriage. This would have been in 1987. And so from the pulpit, he's talking about this and said that he needed to confess everything that I've ever done to two people, Griffin and his wife, Debbie. And so he says, I'll never forget what she said about his wife, setting up a line that drew laughter from the congregation. She said, Robert, I knew you were bad when I married you. I didn't know you were that bad. And this is the mockery. This is what they do. They turn it into a comedy hour. So from the pulpit, he turned what he did to Cindy into a mockery. So if she had heard of this sermon where he says that, can you imagine her thought process? She's already thinking, this is 2017. By this time, she already knows what he's done to her. She's aware. But there's no closure at that point, and it's still driving in that knife. So again, I just want to remind you, 4 decades of what she went through. We can't fathom that. We're getting sound bits of it, but we can't fathom that, what she went through. So in March 12th of this year, 2025, Robert Morris was indicted by a state grand jury of 5 felony counts of lewd or indecent acts with a child, punishable by up to 20 years. And as you may recall, I talked about it, a lot of people talked about it, and they talked about a problem with the statute, because the statute of limitations, it was thought for quite some time that this criminal charge wasn't going to happen because it was so old. It was from the 80s. But the AG's office found a statute that allowed it. It was an old law. They referred to it as an old law that allowed it because people that didn't live there wouldn't be able to come into the state, commit a crime, and then leave, not be prosecuted. So what they did is they told the statute, meaning it stopped when they left the state. And that's exactly what happened with him. Now, at around that time, I looked up the statute myself, and it wasn't repealed. There's no negative treatment to it, meaning there's no appellate court that says that this is bad law or has been challenged by some type of a constitutional argument or something, whatever. There was none of that. So I just didn't think that that was a big deal. And we never did see a challenge to it by his attorney. So I was thinking, perhaps he would plea, just like I said about Tom Cassie, because both Robert Morris and Tom Cassie, very similar. They admitted to what they did. So why are we having a trial? So not quite sure why we're having a trial, but there is a trial for Tom Cassie coming up. He's scheduled for November 18th, which ironically is the same date that Michelle Brannon's trial is scheduled for. But I don't anticipate that that's going to go to trial for Michelle. I do anticipate that it probably will for Tom. So what happened between March and now, this week, for Robert Morris? Well, I anticipate they were likely in communication, his attorney and the Attorney General's office, they were in communication with each other to work up a deal, which is likely what was the result on this date in October. Remember, Robert Morris had a hearing in the beginning of September, and it was continued. I anticipate that likely these negotiations, these talks were going on at that time, and then that's why they just went ahead and just pushed it out 1 month so he could get whatever in order, because he knew he was going to jail, not prison. He went to jail. He was taken out, and it's Osage County, and that's where he'll be. So there's also the civil defamation suit against him and it's scheduled for trial in June of 2026. And I mentioned this in a recent video that I thought it was odd that that was set before the criminal case. Now it makes sense, because he probably knew all this time that he was going to plead guilty, and he entered a plea of guilty. So what does that mean? Okay. What's notable is that he pled guilty to all 5 charges. He didn't plead nolo contendere, which means that it's a nolo plea. That's what we call it, nolo. Means that he's not contesting it, but he's not actually pleading guilty. But it does serve as a guilty verdict in that sense, that he's convicted, but he's not saying what he did. He's just not disputing what he did. In some jurisdictions, when somebody pleads guilty, I mean, that's what we did every time that I had a colloquy with the defendant, they would have to admit what they did, or the judge could have the colloquy with the defendant. So he would have to state facts sufficient to support the crimes that were charged against him. So here there's 5. So I imagine he would have had to have said what he did, that it happened at least 5 times within this time frame to satisfy the judge, so that the judge could accept the guilty plea, enter it in, and then he is sentenced. And more likely than not, they probably had conferences with the judge to make sure that the agreement between the 2 parties was going to be accepted by the judge, so that everybody knows what's going to happen. So why did he not go to prison? Well, that was part of the negotiation, even though he is sentenced to 10 years, which I think is notable too, because that's half of what he could have got. Remember, it's a 20-year sentence. He got half of that. And you might be saying, but no, he didn't. He did. He got 10 years of supervision. It's just going to be served in 6 months. That increment is in jail. The rest is going to be served out in the form of probation. But listen, okay? He's under supervision for 10 years, meaning if he gets out of jail and he violates a condition of his bond, he could end up in prison. What are his conditions of bond? Well, I don't know. But I can tell you this, he's a registered sex offender now, and he cannot be around children. I don't know what that's going to look like with children in his family. Probably he can. Not quite sure. But I'm sure he can't be around school, so he can't be in a church that has a school or children. That's what it's going to look like. So if he violates a provision of probation that he will be on for 9.5 years, he could go to prison. So I found it very notable. Also, county jail doesn't allow visitors. So he's carted off to jail, not prison. If he went to prison, he could have visitors, but you would have to have at least a year and a day sentence for that. It would have to take you beyond that year to get you into the Department of Corrections. They didn't agree on that, and this is what they agreed on, the jail sentence. So that means he can have communications by phone. He's not going to have visitors. I've never heard of a county jail allowing visitors, but is it possible? Perhaps. I've never heard of that. Department of Corrections is where he would have been set up if he he could have visitors. But this was avoided for a reason. They didn't want him in Department of Corrections. So they're going to transfer his probation to Texas, from my understanding, once he gets out of Osage County Jail. It's just a local jail. Will it be better than a prison? It could be. Sounds to me, by all accounts, for Tom Cassie in the local jail, that, he's on the phone all day long. Maybe Robert Morris will be too. Robert Morris was also ordered to pay restitution to Cindy in the amount of $270,000. Now, could she have gone to trial and gotten this kind of a result? Well, perhaps, but maybe not with the restitution. That amount, I'm not sure if that amount would have been ordered. But, she finally got some money. He must register as a sex offender. He was looking at 20 years. So this is a known sentence, which is agreeable by the parties, that this is a good result. At the court, after the sentencing, Cindy said that she was satisfied with the sentence because of its certainty. She said something to that effect. And I understand that. That is something that I would deal with all the time, taking children or any victims to court, because, you have to put them on the stand. That can be traumatic. If they want to avoid it or their parents want to avoid it, well, there's the option of a plea deal. And that was something that was considered here. And obviously they entered into this agreement, and it sounds like from Cindy's account that this was agreeable to her and she has satisfaction with it. And while, in my opinion, I think he would have been found guilty because you had the accounts and he admitted to it, but you're never certain. Nothing's ever a slam dunk. So this is what Cindy said after the sentencing. Today, justice has finally been served, and the man who manipulated, groomed, and abused me as a 12-year-old innocent girl is finally going to be behind bars. My hope is that many victims hear my story and it can help lift their shame and allow them to speak up. She said, today is a new beginning for me, my family, and friends who have been by my side through this horrendous journey. I leave the courtroom today not as a victim, but a survivor. That's impactful. I love that she said that. And it's true. She is a survivor. And she mentioned that during the impact statements that she and her sister read to the court, that Robert Morris did not look at them. He did not look at her family. Now, that could have been something that his attorney told him not to do, or he could have just turned around and said, I'm sorry. He could have done that, but he didn't. And Cindy made mention of it after the sentencing. And interestingly, after the sentencing, his attorney made a statement and said that Morris wanted him, the attorney, to tell Clemishar and her family that he sincerely apologizes for his conduct and asks for their forgiveness. Well, it might be a little too late. I mean, obviously they want to forgive. You have to forgive. But 4 decades later, he's asking for it now. What about all of this time, even in the last year? In my opinion, I just didn't find him to be, he doesn't strike me as someone who's repentant. But I don't know his heart, right? So that's just my opinion. Was this justice for Cindy and her family? I believe it was, just based upon what Cindy said. It's not prison. I get it. I know people are upset about that. I really thought he was going to prison. If they went to trial, he would have. But it's okay, because he's under probation. He's under the court's authority for 10 years. So if he's 63, 64, he'll be in his low 70s. And no amount of money can right this wrong. The wrong of him, Robert Morris, his wife, and all the others trying to gaslight Cindy into believing that she was the one who initiated it and she's the bad one and she's the villain. No amount of money. So $270,000 is nothing. But yet, wait, there's also the civil suit. So, and I'm just making this up. This is just hypothetical. What if she's awarded $10 million or they settle on that amount? Does that make a difference? Well, not in the context of righting any wrong. No amount of money is going to cure or negate what she went through. She went through this for decades. And I know people will be offended by that, about the 10 million. That's not enough. Well, this is about a mindset. This is about abuse that appears to be rampant, in my opinion, and appears to be covered up repeatedly. So I'm going to share a story. You all know, if you've been watching me, my involvement with IHOP KC. I was a part of them from a distance. I didn't live there, but I had friends that were there, friends that were on staff. I would go there several times a year for conferences or just to go to the prayer room or to see my friends. And, I believe that Mike Bickle was the righteous man that he told everybody he was and had everybody believing. But I became aware of who he was in October of 2023 when friends reached out and said that there were people saying that they were victims of his, and I believed it because I believe my friends. I believe that they're credible. And what do you know? There's 17 of them that actually came out. So if you followed that story, you knew that the victims that came out and the ones that supported them were extremely persecuted. They were dragged. They were just attacked viciously, doxxed. It was horrible. Much worse than I'm seeing with everything else. And I know I've shared that before. So shortly after that exposure, I posted on Facebook about Mike Bickle, talking about Mike Bickle here. And I noticed some of my friends that I know, live in my area, but they're also what you would consider IHOppers or, House of Prayer people or whatever. None of them were saying anything. And it was just silent. Or they posted and said that they were defending Mike and praying for Mike Bickle's family, praying for him. So I kind of knew who was where, in this. And one of these people was someone that I thought was a good friend. So when Mike Bickle decided to come out with his own statement, which was just shortly, I think it was in the beginning of November of 2023. And so my friend's wife posted on her Facebook Mike Bickle's statement. So naturally I responded and I said, why would you do that? And she claimed, because I'm not picking sides. And then my friend, her husband, chimes in, yeah, we're not picking sides. And then their daughter chimes in, we're not picking sides. And then they go on and start attacking me. So before I advanced my ultimate point in hypothetical, I wanted to establish some things. So I said, and this is just my recollection of kind of this back and forth. I said, so let me get this straight. You're not taking sides because you're claiming that you weren't there, so you couldn't possibly know what happened. Right, correct. Oh, okay. So these people have been deemed credible, but you're not going to believe them because you weren't there. And even though they're saying this is against Mike Bickle, well, he's a pastor, he's a pastor. So, okay. So because it's against Mike Bickle, okay, I got it. So you would agree with me, though, perhaps, that any pastor that SAs a young lady or a child, that's wrong, right? You'd agree with me on that. Oh, yes, of course. Yeah. So they shouldn't be doing that then, right? Right, exactly. But what about talking about that kind of stuff on social media? Should people be talking about that? Well, no, because it's not their business and they weren't there. Okay. So should that person, Mike Bickle, or someone like that, should they be brought to justice? Should somebody go to the police? Well, no, because why? Because God will take care of it. Oh, so they shouldn't go to the police because God will take care of it. Right. We shouldn't be talking about it. That's nobody's business. So I said, okay, so now that we've established all that, and my friend, let's call him Miguel. So Miguel, If your daughter came to you and told you that she had been essayed by your pastor, you wouldn't believe her at all, would you? Well, yes, of course I would, he said. Okay. But it's your pastor, so you can't believe that your pastor would do something like that, right? Well, if my daughter said so. Well, you wouldn't want to talk about it to anybody. You wouldn't want to inform them about what the pastor did to your daughter. Well, yes, I would, because other people would get hurt. Okay. You wouldn't call the police, right? You wouldn't call the police. You wouldn't want to start an investigation. Well, of course I would. And in fact, I'd want to kill him. That's what he said. I said, well, thank you very much for making my point. I see your position. It doesn't matter that somebody else's daughter was essayed. It only matters if your daughter was essayed. Got it. And that's exactly how I ended it. And I've never talked to him since and don't intend to. So my point in recounting that event is to make the point that there are some really sick and twisted people out there, and that's the mentality that we're dealing with. And that's what's underlying this cover-up culture. So it's not as simple as perhaps, if Robert Morris decided, and perhaps the co-defendants decided to settle with Cindy Clemenshire, oh, here's a $10 million check. That is not going to cure or remove the history of what happened to her. It just doesn't. So it just doesn't. So people that think, oh, she's after the money, don't say that stuff on my channel, because no amount of money is going to right that wrong. So next, let's talk about Sean Combs. But just let me know what you think about, this is justice. We're talking about 4 different people. I'm talking about justice here. So let me know what you think about whether justice was served with Cindy Clemenshire. I'm going to talk about Sean Combs briefly, and I think it's relevant, and you'll see why. Do you recall that he was charged with some very serious federal charges, but he was only convicted on 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution? And those 2 charges, they're both the same. It's just 2 counts, and they are punishable by up to 10 years. So I tried to go back at my other videos, looking at them to see if I had predicted what I thought would be a sentence, and I couldn't find it. And I don't even know if I said it, but maybe I said it on Everett's channel. I don't know. And you guys can correct me if you find it. I think that I was saying it would be between 3 and 7 years. I don't know. You tell me. So if you watched, or if you don't know, I'll tell you now, he got 50 months. So it's 4 years and 2 months. And that sentence was given by a federal judge in New York yesterday, which was October 3rd. So during his sentencing, Sean Combs, he has the opportunity to speak. And he says, I would like to apologize to Cassie Ventura and her family. She was one of the victims. I apologize to Jane Doe, that's another victim, for bringing you into my mess. I would like to apologize to all victims of domestic violence. I know that the disgusting video triggered people. I was sick from drugs. Are you catching this? He spoke. And he apologized to the victims, and in fact to all domestic violence victims. Very different from Robert Morris. Now, I don't know if Sean Combs is being truthful. I don't know. But I'm just pointing out that here, somebody with the heinous crimes, and you saw, if you watched, you saw all the allegations. But he's apologizing to the victims. Robert Morris couldn't do that. It gets better. Sean Combs says, I knew better. My faith taught me better. You got Robert Morris, this celebrated pastor of this mega ministry, pastor. His faith didn't teach him better. Sean Combs, he's a celebrity. He's into debauchery, we know that. But he acknowledges that his faith taught him better. He said, I lost my ability to be with my family. I lost all my businesses. I hate myself right now. I apologize to my 7 children. You deserve better. To my mother, you taught me better. I will never put my hands on someone again. What did we hear from Robert Morris? Crickets. Then the judge spoke. The judge talked about seeing the video of Cassie. He talks about collateral consequences and consideration of all of his history. And listen to what the judge says here. A history of good works can't wash away the record in this case. Why is that relevant with all the cases that we talk about here on this channel about ministry leaders? I'm adopting this line from this judge because it applies. What do we hear time and time again? Mike Bickle's sister, Lisa Stribling. He is a righteous man. He has been pardoned by God. He has the gift. He is to the world. He needs to be preaching. Look at what he's done. Look at what Dr. Michael Brown has done. He preaches to the world. They preach and they bring souls to Christ. Okay. So what about what you've done to those children and women? A history of good works can't wash away the record, can it? Well, it can't in Sean Combs' case because the judge said so, rightly so. Critical, logical, rational, reasonable thinking. You know, something that people in these ministries that cover up, they either don't have it or they don't want it. They just reject it. They exchange the truth for lies. But here in the secular, this is what we see. We see Sean Combs apologizing. We see him mentioning his faith and that his faith would have helped him to know better. But we don't hear that from this celebrated pastor the day before. I find it ironic. Maybe you don't, but I do. They're just one day apart. The judge goes on and says to Sean Combs, you abuse these women. The evidence of the abuse is massive. I was sitting right here during the testimony. Well, guess what's coming up? Tom Cassie's trial in about 7 weeks. And guess who's going to be sitting right there listening to the evidence? The jury and the judge. 4 victims. One of them is a sister. The judge says, you had the power and resources to keep it going. You are more than just a John. A significant sentence is required to deter. You say you're sorry and you won't do it again. After Miss Ventura's civil lawsuit was filed, after the video, referring to the one where he was beating up Cassie, was public, an investigation started, and you had a brutal hotel night with Jane Doe where you punched her in the head, showing that he was calling Sean out, that you're really not a changed man. And commentators, because this is not being televised, this is federal court, so commentators are commentating and saying, oh my gosh, the judge is going to give him a significant sentence with that statement. But he didn't. 4 years and 2 months is not significant. And the judge said, this isn't something that just happened once or twice. It happened for years. Well, we see that with Tom Cassie. Decades of abuse. 4 victims that have come forward so far. We see that with David and Michelle, with the David E. Taylor cult. 12 years. The judge says, exploitation and violence against women must be met with real accountability to promote respect for the law. I like that. I agree. Accountability. Justice. That's what we're seeking. So, for Sean, he got 4 years and 2 months. He's going to be in a federal prison, and he's going to have time served. So he's been in the MDC, Metropolitan Detention Center in New York. He's been there for a little over a year, so he'll get credit for that. And ultimately, he could get credit for good behavior, enrolling in classes. Sometimes they allow that. So I wouldn't be surprised if he gets out in 2 years or less. And he has a $500,000 fine. So was that justice? Well, based upon the convictions, there were 10-year sentences. I think it kind of was. I mean, yeah, we heard about all the stuff that happened, but he wasn't convicted of those other charges. So that's my thought, but let me know what you think. Next, let's talk about Michelle Brannon. I've been talking about her a lot, but I want to talk about it in the context of the bond, the $10,000 bond. Was that justice? Obviously, we don't have a trial yet. We'll get to that. But there's a new article that came out yesterday, October 3rd, from the Houston Chronicle, titled, "Kill Them on Contact. Houston ministry leader sought to train end-time army officials allege." A former hotel in Houston was the principal location of two religious leaders accused of filling call centers with unpaid workers across several states, and with the U.S. Department of Justice claiming an armed guard and locked gate prevented movement in or out of the secured building. In the article, it reads that David E. Taylor believed he was a general leading the end-time army, and that he was accused of expecting his workers to wage war against anyone seeking to interfere with his mission. He's quoted in the article as saying, "I am just telling you, you kill them on contact if they come in here with that foolishness. You understand? They need to die." Okay. When do you hear of a reputable pastor talking like this? If you've watched any of the videos of David Taylor, he repeatedly, from the pulpit, would call people names, beg for money. What reputable pastor calls people names? "God gonna get you," cursing people, telling people that if they opposed him, that God was gonna get him, God was gonna kill him, God was gonna do stuff to him. Who does that? He does, and did it for decades. And people think that that's biblical. He still has a ton of followers. They're supporting him. They're in collusion. They're in concert. At this point, you know, there is, you all know I interviewed Leslie Portillo last week. She was part of that call center making those calls, getting the money. But she's repented, she's turned around, and she's talked about it. She's been in many articles, matter of fact. Not many, but several. At what point do you become a co-conspirator, another defendant? Because I really do anticipate that we're going to see indictments against some of the other people involved in that cult, based upon statements that the prosecutor made of the bond hearing, of the audio that I listened to. It sounds like there just may be. So, people that remain, and they remain loyal, you know, God's going to give you time to repent. He's going to give you time. But at some point, your heart, your mind is seared. And so I think that some of these people, I've seen them on my channel, I've seen them on other people's channels as well. They're relentless. They support this cult. So in my opinion, they're just as bad because they're supporting them. So they take the position, just like I shared, of the ones that are protecting and covering up for those leaders who have abused, committed crimes, etc. That's what it looks like in this context with the David E. Taylor case. So yes, I've talked about the case for several weeks. I talked about the fact that $10,000 bond was given by the judge, which was extremely off-putting. It was very disturbing. And the judge wanted some specifics that he didn't get from the prosecutor. He wanted evidence of physical assault. He wanted her to show him some medical records. Well, a $10,000 bond, in my opinion, is not justice. These quotes by David E. Taylor, that one I just read, similar ones too. They're in the indictment. They're in the memo for detainment by the government. And we have Michelle Brannon, his co-defendant, his partner in crime, co-conspirator, whatever you want to call it. They have they have a scheme, they have a plan, they have an organization. It's theirs. They're inextricably intertwined together. It doesn't matter that one might have an elevated platform over the other, whatever it is. They're both in it together. They're working in concert. They're operating this cult. They're operating this scheme. She's just as culpable as he is. It's very similar to, culpability. And that's the argument that her attorney is going to make, okay? That she was also forced, coerced, whatever. But when people enter into an agreement, take, for an example, people that decide to go rob a convenience store. There's a driver, and then there's two others. The two others get out of the car and they go commit the act. The driver doesn't commit the act, but he or she is just as culpable as the two that are in the store committing the act. Okay. Now, if there is somebody gets harmed, somebody loses their life, and it doesn't matter who. It could be the two perpetrators. Say they're shot by a good Samaritan. So they don't come out of the store, and then the driver drives off. Guess who gets charged with murder? Not the good Samaritan, the driver. That's how law works. You're in it together. So it is very troubling. The article goes on to state that many members of the church have stood by David E. Taylor. Oh, yes, they have. And that David E. Taylor has been anticipating his arrest for years. Yes, he's been talking about that on videos. But interesting, he's the apostle of all apostles. He's above all the pastors in the world. And he is Jesus's best friend. But Jesus apparently didn't find him to be that good of a friend to share with him that he was going to be raided and arrested. Maybe they were on the outs that day. So in this article, it read that in regard to the raid on the Houston site, that the FBI had to enter through the roof for their own safety because the church personnel were known to be heavily armed. Does this not scream cult without screaming cult? And these are the things that the judge would have read. He read this stuff. And he did admit, he conceded, if this is a cult, it's troubling, whatever he said about that. But how do you not know that? Yes, these are allegations, but that's what a complaint is. That's what an indictment is. It's allegations. They haven't put on the evidence yet. A bond hearing, they typically don't. They could have. It sounded like that is what the judge wanted. But there's word out that when Michelle made her bond that she went to go live in an apartment. But I get information, you guys, I've talked to you about that. I get information on every case I do. There's stuff that I can't share, who gives it to me, whatever, and I don't, So I do have information that she is not in an apartment. She's actually in a 3-bedroom house, and it looks like a pretty nice lot. So I don't know what's why people are saying it's an apartment. I've heard some people say that she's on house arrest, but I've not seen anything, and I've reviewed the order on the bond and the conditions, and there's a GPS monitor, but it doesn't say that she's on house arrest. In fact, the judge didn't even order her to seek employment, which I thought was strange, considering he also ordered that she's not to have any contact with any cult members, but yet the only money she can get is from the cult members, but yet she can have contact with her son Joshua, who is a cult member. I don't know. Make it make sense. It's very confusing. And then I just got word while I was doing this video. It looks like, I don't have any confirmation, but it does look like David is now out of that Pike County custody, but it is unclear as I'm sitting here right now where he is, and how it always happens. It always does. As soon as I'm done with it, then I'll find out. But I'll just update you in the next one. Or I'll just, if there is an update, I'll just put it in the pinned comment. But you know, if I was his attorney, I would be like, yeah, get him out. They're giving out candy over there. That judge, he's going to get out on a bond too. So I would suspect that, you know, I would get my client over there because he's going to get a bond. He's going to get out. He's going to get out of jail. That's what I anticipate if we are to follow what just happened, I should say. So in the article, it says that multiple minor children of workers lived in the Kingdom of God properties, and that some had been separated from their parents for years. And in the article, one of the victims, Clifton Ware, said that this happened to him and his family. He told the Houston Chronicle that he spent a decade by David's side as a cook, cleaner, and driver for him in Missouri. Clifton said that his now ex-wife and three minor children were all involved in the church, and that he eventually made a plan to get his children back. So he left first, and then he made a plan to get his children out of there. What did he do? He sought financial stability after spending 10 years in that cult as unpaid labor. And then he brought his children out to live with him. He said that his kids are now living normal lives, but he cannot deny the impact of their time that they had at Kingdom of God. He said that since his children have moved in with him, that they've told him about things that he had no idea that they witnessed. He said that his children have suffered trauma, especially after he left. So we're going to see some people, and I've talked to some people that were involved in the cult that I haven't interviewed because, you know, either they don't want to or it's just not necessary. So one individual I talked to, he was part of that, the group in Taylor, Michigan, and he said that he never witnessed for himself. He never experienced any type of abuse, and he never saw it happening either. So that's not unusual. Just because it's not happening to everybody doesn't mean that it's not happening. It's just not happening to some, but it's happening to others. So not everybody's experience is going to be the same. But that seems to be the ray of hope. It seems as though for some of these people, the cult members that are still operating, and they're pretty vocal about their loyalty to David Taylor. I mean, they look to him like he's God. And so, and even Michelle's attorney brought it up that there were people in the cult that were in, well, he doesn't call it that, people in the ministry that were in the court that day, and they're going to have, their testimony is going to establish that they never got abused or anything. Well, of course. I mean, similar to somebody that he talked to me and he told me that too. But he doesn't disagree or negate or oppose what people are saying. It's those people's story. It's not his. It didn't happen to him. It's such an unusual thing for people to say. And, you know, I see it a lot when talking to people, you know, you have a certain relationship with somebody. Even as a parent, you can have a relationship with your kid in this way, and maybe your spouse doesn't have that, and you might have different discussions about that. It's your perception, it's your experience, and the fact that people try to take that away from people is so remarkable to me. I've always noticed, way before I ever joined, you know, this platform, but I've always noticed that people, they try to minimize, like, oh, well, you're crazy for thinking that because my experience is this, and that. Well, that's your experience. It's not mine. Don't take that away from me. I'm not going to accept what you say just because you say it. Okay. So is there justice in the $10,000 bond? That's the bottom line. I don't think so. It sends a message to victims that what they went through is just inconsequential. That's my opinion. Let me know your thoughts. The last topic is Mike Bickle. So this week, past week, a new report came out, and it was very interesting. And I'm not going to go into it because this is over an hour and I have it all here, but I'm just going to talk about the highlights, what they ultimately concluded. As you guys know, Mike Bickle was found to have had 17 victims that came forward. They gave testimony and recounted events where Mike Bickle was SAing them or grooming them. Tons and tons of information. It's all in here, talking about the things that he would do. And so ultimately, he was deemed not fit for ministry, but now we have this new result. Goes a little bit deeper and makes some more findings. And it says that Mike Bickle should be removed from local church fellowship. So just from fellowship, don't have him in your church until such time as he would humbly submit to the process of repentance. So clearly they're finding that he has yet to date not repented. So we're almost 2 years out. This month will be 2 years at the end of the month. Well, essentially this month. What's today? The 4th? It was around this time when it came out. I didn't find out about it until the end of the month. So they also said that he must never be permitted to re-enter a congregation related to IHOP KC. So he's done with that. He's been done with that. He has not been heard from. You know, what we're seeing is the other ones. The ones that are so vocal. Joni Lamb and Perry Stone and Art Lucier and who else? Michael Brown. They can't shut up. They just can't. But Mike Bickle seems a lot smarter than them. He didn't go out there and say anything, but he didn't need to. He had his family and friends doing the dirty work for him. Terrorizing people, doxing people. So lastly, it says that he should be considered as having permanently disqualified himself from leadership, as the scripture describes. And they talk about the scriptures, having failed to live in a manner commensurate with the gospel. I would 100% agree. The PRT, that's the name of the group, does not believe that any return to leadership would be scripturally sound. Well, I think that's what everybody has been saying for the last 2 years. I would 100% agree. Now to the justice aspect. People say this all the time. Maybe they haven't been following it or not realizing it. Mike Bickle has never been criminally prosecuted. Mike Bickle has never seen a civil suit against him. And he won't. Why is that? Because the statute of limitations for both has run a long time ago. His crime started 4 decades ago. And unfortunately, there wasn't a statute in effect in the states where those crimes were committed, such as what we saw in Robert Morris. See how we can just tie stuff up? We can just tie it all together. That didn't happen with Mike Bickle. Does that mean he's going to get off? No, because ultimately there's Judgment Day and he has to face God. So what this report is saying, that they don't see evidence of repentance, is what it sounds like to me. And if that's the case, if he's unrepentant, well, does he get in? Well, let's hope that he does someday repent. Let's hope that all of these people someday repent, because we don't want them, their souls lost either, but we want justice. What was it that the statement was from the judge that was so good? Let me see if I can get it real quick. Well, here's one of them. A history of good works can't wash away the record, but there was something else. Oh, the accountability part. So Exploitation and violence against women must be met with real accountability to promote respect for the law. So in the context of the Bible, scriptural law, God's law, there is a requirement for accountability. He requires it. We have to make that decision on our own, whether we are going to forgive others, whether we are going to acknowledge that we're sinners, that we need Jesus, that we receive Jesus. Otherwise, we're not going to be we're not going to be reconciled with God. So there is accountability in the law, and God's law, it's running parallel. We've got the law of the land. We've got the Bible. And they work in concert to a certain degree. Obviously, there's a level of mercy, and throughout the Bible, of course, we have that. But what's required before that is repentance, true repentance. And you see that too, I did at least, in my cases when I was a prosecutor, where a judge would give mercy when the factors or circumstances supported that. Such as, the person was really getting into, enrolled in college, GED, whatever, doing things to better themselves, got a job. And mercy would be shown. And that is what these people that support the ones who are doing the bad deeds, they love to throw out there. Well, what about mercy? And what about you? So we should just talk about you? Go ahead and talk about us. If we're doing something wrong and we need to repent, go ahead. No one is stopping you. But that's all they got. And it really falls flat. And it's not credible. It's not logical. They refuse critical thinking. They refuse logic. They refuse the truth. The gospel that they claim to proclaim is entirely rejected. And it's ironic because the pastors are up there with their Bibles claiming that they're preaching from it, but it's the rules for thee and not for me. Maybe clearly they could see if somebody else, not them, but somebody else was doing these things, that it would be appropriate for that person to be criminally charged. But then when it comes to them or a family member, it's a different story. Remember Miguel? He made an incredible point. That's the point. If it's somebody else, it doesn't matter. It's somebody else's daughter. Who cares? Let's kick him to the side. The pastor can use them up. It's okay. I'm going to take the side of the pastor. Okay, Miguel, what about your daughter? Oh, I'd kill the guy. Oh, I see. Thank you for clearing that up. That, folks, unfortunately, is the mentality that we're seeing. So, this has gone long enough. I think this is the longest time I've talked, and I need a break. So I hope that you guys are all doing well. I hope that this video was helpful, and I really, really do look forward to your comments, and I will see you soon.